We're joined for another sculpture forum, and I am with my usual friends, Jock Ireland and Brandt Junceau. And we're joined for this forum, delighted to have with us Paige Pedri, who is also managing the video. And we're also joined by Torild, who's in Norway. So we have two young women, exciting artists joining us, not just grumpy old men. We've all seen an exhibition of work by Rebecca Warren, British sculptor, born, I think, in 1965, making her 60 years old. Very well established, working in a variety of materials. Looking forward to this discussion. It follows our discussion of the Thomas J. Price exhibition of figures, and this is an exhibition of figures, in this case, female figures in bronze, the traditional female nude, standing female nude for the most part. There are one or two other things in the show. Rebecca Warren is known for a variety of work, and I won't try and articulate the range of things she's done. So I'll open it up to anybody who wants to start. Tirel, you wanted to join us for this. You maybe have strong feelings about the work.
When I saw the show twice. The work is really bold. I haven't seen her life-size figure works like that before. So it's quite striking. And the way she used the room, the way it was installed. Also some strange things, the sculpture stand and the more abstract constructions, but they sort of, they worked in harmony. So the whole thing was sort of an installation. Yeah, I thought it was very strong. I'm a painter, but I do work with sculpture too, but much smaller size and with a figure. And I work a lot with female body as well, and abstractions too. But the story part of it, there was something about the females, and they were almost like wounds or something. And there was like a very strong breast fixation somewhat. They seemed a little bit static or something. Yeah, the traces of clothing. There was some details, like a nail was painted red, I think. And I need a little time to kind of formulate something more, but thought it was an interesting show for sure.
Yeah, thank you. The bronze figures are hand painted with for the most part, quite a lot of paint, seemingly handled very loosely in relation to the forms. There are one or two other things in the show, a construction and so on, and one reclining figure, and I think, if I recall correctly, one couple. Go ahead, Brandt.
I don't know her work in person very well. It struck me that this was a kind of a milder, sweeter set of works than what I know otherwise. I didn't really get a grasp of this sort of muse or girlish artist maybe theme. And perhaps I admire her variousness and her willingness and even kind of reliance on warm and kind of wry humor, which is I think some kind of sense of humor is really, almost categorically necessary in sculpture, but it's sometimes in short supply. And for her, never. There's something self-deprecating and kind of nurturing of her subjects that I appreciate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree certainly with the humor.
But who that character is, like I'm at a loss. Looked fairly carefully. The scheme of the figure repeats clearly. The body doesn't repeat in all its details, and the heads vary, but they're very similar.
Yes.
It really seems like a concerted, directed group of I don't know what versions or variations on a kind of person.
Yeah, I had to look very carefully to see if I was actually engaging, a different version of the same figure, perhaps the same cast, but painted differently, or with something different added. But obviously, I mean, to some extent, given that what we're looking at, they have to be self-portraits to some extent, don't they?
Well, I think maybe in the sense that one's work always is, but whether it's a more literal self-portrait of the artist, I don't know. I
I see.
actually felt like person was a little bit lacking. I felt like that the woman was more, well, almost like more kind of a type or stock character is too definite, but some kind of a go-to character rather than an observed individual.
It's a difficult show to talk about. I could go back to the Price show, and I was shocked by a comment I think maybe Brandt made, or at least started, to make a connection between the Price works and Michelangelo's David. And I was shocked by that, but I thought about it, and I think most people will sort of go along with Brandt's suggestion and receive it as enlightening and opening up both Michelangelo and Price's work. But I see a big gap between the two things. Brought that thought into the Rebecca's show, and I thought, what if we compare Rebecca's figures to Donatello's David, little bronze David, roughly the same size as these figures? Is it reasonable, or is it shocking or wrong to compare these two things? And I think it's mostly wrong, but it's interesting, or it was interesting for me to think about that. The sort of immediate difference between the two things is, you could say that the Donatello is a finished work, and that Rebecca's works are unfinished, and even though they're in a gallery out of her studio, and you can, I guess, buy these things and take them home with you. But still, there's less finish than is part of the Donatello. But that leads me to think, how did she didn't finish, or how did she start these things? That allows for a connection, or at least to me. And it seems that she started by saying no to a lot of things about making a figure, making a sculpture today. Says no, and she, along with a lot of other sculptors today, a lot of other, maybe particularly women sculptors, are saying no to a lot of sort of old ways of doing things, and that's interesting to me. I have a lot of friends who have that same impulse to say no. And it makes me think of Picasso early in the 20th century, as he was inventing what eventually came to be called Cubism. He was saying no to the Renaissance, to the 19th century French Academy, to all kinds of things, and saying no sort of insistently, not going for beauty and truth, but going for ugliness, and uh,
Mm.
making stupid, crude moves.
Or
To
stop him.
Sorry?
Somebody stop, Jock.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, I
I'm
mean,
going on too long, but
oh, it's not really going on too long. I think there's a lot of disagreement with what you're saying. Is what
Yeah.
I certainly have. I certainly think the way you're framing this in terms of it being about a negative rejection rather than a seeking something new and positive.
no,
But
I think both she and Picasso were seeking something new and positive, but they had to go at it by saying no to the sort of traditional way of doing things, making figures.
Torild,
Yeah, they feel raw and real to me. They don't feel ugly. You were talking about ugliness. I don't think I think I don't see it as that, but they're a little brutal. They're a little harsh, you know. And when I what I was thinking, you were talking a little bit about Jock redefining the rebelling against maybe, right? But in that redefining the human, the female figure, right? With these runes, they almost felt like, especially second time I saw the show, it was almost, they almost felt like saints or something. Like they're, or what do they call those? Yeah, I guess saints. Like they had all these 2x4s, or whatever, like stuck in them, and all these. Yeah, they felt like there was something almost religious about them, and also beautiful, the rawness of that paint dripping and the pinks, and it was I don't know, they took on a new life. They're a little bit strange and a little bit hard to look at almost. And so as I was there the second time, I saw various people come by. They kind of dropped in and they looked very confused by it, you know. So that was kind of an interesting thing to see, to how they perceived it. And also, I think she's using the figure, which, you know, you have to do if you're going to redefine something, to create another language, another understanding. So, like I was just seeing, like the arms becomes a circle. It's no longer. I just mean like she's trying to go further than the body. Is she successful in that? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes the hands are really big. They look like they're from, you know, some monster or something. They're not even 5 fingers. So she's taking, and then obviously, why do they have all of a sudden like you know, what's it called, like a bow or something? You know, you know, I don't know, but
Yeah. Paige, it's your turn.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I agree with a lot of what Torild said. I thought at first the figures felt very bold. In some of them, there's like this warrior-like quality, almost like they have fought through something in a way. And some of the figures feel a little demure, but at the same time, like you said, Garth, that figures almost felt like were they cast from the same mold and then manipulated. That I found really interesting. At first, I was very off-put by the paint on the figures. That felt very like splashed on and unintentional, and I'm not sure if that's how it was meant to be, or if it's just my bias against that. Like I prefer, you know, the figures where there was like the blue painted bow on the back of the head, or the little, you know, red fingernail, and was a little more cohesive, and a lot of the paint splashing made the figures feel a little bit even more disjointed, even though they have like these strange shoulders and arms and large calves. And there is something definitely bold about these sculptures that I think is powerful in a way that is really interesting.
Yeah, I have to confess that somewhat to my surprise, because I have seen a previous show at this gallery of Rebecca's work, which I found very thin and difficult to kind of really make sense of. So I was surprised by this show, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed looking at these things. I found them engaging and stimulating, and a sense in which they kind of attacked and re-engaged a very kind of traditional, you know, theme, the standing female nude, and it gave it a real sense of freshness and the freedom with which presumably these things were originally modeled in clay by the look of them, and the clay is handled very freely, and the paint is handled very freely. I had a sense of somebody really enjoying, you know, themselves in the studio, and talking to themselves, and you know, engaging with a lot of things that we've all seen and thought about, you know, from Victorian to you know, to antique. You know, the things that were mysterious to me, and I enjoyed that. You know, she has some of them on wheeled bases that are not horizontal, and so on. And as somebody else noted, you know, the various have bits and pieces, figures have bits and pieces stuck in them, or they're holding something, or that seems to be somewhat disconnected and yet sort of makes sense. There's some sense of sacrifice I felt as well. in an almost kind of religious kind of sense, spiritual at least. So yeah, I had a very positive reaction and was surprised by just how positive I felt about them. Because I mean, I think that the way Jock was going on about unfinished and rejection, and I can see where he's coming from, but it didn't feel that way to me. It felt very positive, and I think by unfinished, maybe Jock, you meant sort of open, in a way, open to a range of responses. I'm not quite sure if that is what you meant by unfinished, but if it is, then I would agree with it. But in some ways, again, I felt that was a positive thing. The works did not have any one specific interpretation. They were open, and yet as objects they are fixed. They are what they are. So
But
that.
maybe you can say something more about what when you said sacrifice. Garth? What if you're going to?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure to know exactly what gave me that idea, except that these figures had things. Some of them had things stuck in them, like a piece of 2x4, that would seem to be, impossible anatomically, without it being. Probably killing the person. That was where it came from. I think that was what triggered it, was this sense that these things had attachments that were not appropriate at all. And somehow or other try and make sense of that was just, I wondered, like, why? What did this signify?
I think that leads to the mystery of them, I believe, which is really it makes them engaging. I get a sense that there was a searching going on, both internal and external, in terms of like her own relationship to perhaps the model or what she was thinking about, as well as, the formal constructs.
Yeah.
And really searching to find those things. It is curious, like the large hands and the things stuck in. It does create that mystery, which makes the figures step beyond being the figure in a way.
Yeah, the parts of them feel very haptic, like they're made by a blind person. Going back to Price, they were very different to me in the sense that the Price seemed to be engaged in a very openly public kind of dialogue, while obviously these things are public and they do engage issues that we all kind of aware of, but they seem to, nevertheless, to me, to be very personal and not to have the kind of what I would have felt was almost a kind of a message that the Price works had. These seemed to be, whatever, they were not delivering a message. They were not saying this person is worthy of your respect.
This brings up an interesting thing vis-a-vis both of them, because it's something that I wish I'd said when we were talking about Price, is that this is an artist who has a kind of declarative statement to make, and he's using sculpture as a means of communication. And so much of the art that we look at and think most seriously about is concerned with its own language, as I think this work is, and hardly means to make a declarative statement. It hardly means to communicate, to anyone but someone involved in the same language, in the same way. So that's something that I actually found missing in this exhibition. I couldn't kind of find an emotional center, and I couldn't find a correspondence between a kind of exaggeration and, like the bold manipulation of the forms, an emotional presence, an emotional content, a statement. It seemed that the piece, that the figure and the piece, the character was indifferent to how it was made or what was happening to it. Great, exaggerations in its own form.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure that I understand what you're saying, Brent.
Well, this is a show, you could say that her work in general, over years is, concerned and I think a really admirable way with previous modern sculpture. You could say it's almost like a kind of companion to Tucker's early modern sculpture. In this show, for one thing, there's this kind of go-to preoccupation with the Degas little dancer. Funny position of the feet in that one piece that's basically unpainted bronze. The repeated presence of a hair ribbon. Sometimes it's real, sometimes it's modeled and painted. And the general kind of girlishness, almost kind of immature, like a light kind of girlishness, at least ostensibly so. I mean, I was ready to see something more complicated going on under the surface, like you see in the Degas. It just really has this, tremendous presence of character that's almost at variance or conflict with her role or her future. I mean, the piece really has a history and has a future. I didn't feel that kind of thing here. It really felt like smart, witty, focused, enthusiastic, exploration of issues, long-standing issues, central, integral issues of sculpture. So in that way, I disagree with you, Jock, because I think the pieces say yes to so much. And there's hardly a sculptor working who so relies and employs and enjoys traditional means of sculpture.
I agree with all of that. But somehow or other, you began that with some negative kind of implication. I mean, there was something you're missing, which you found in the Price work, but which you find absent here, and that was for you, something you wanted and didn't find. I mean, am I correct? And
Yeah, there's a certain willingness to directly communicate something presumably personal and unique to the artist that a whole lot of modern contemporary art can live without, but that I miss. And when it shows up, I really feel sort of met and addressed and communicated to.
Yeah, but that, the reverse of my sense of that Price had something to say. And as you said, he was using sculpture to say it. I don't think that Rebecca Warren in this work knows precisely what it is she wants to say, and she's making the work in order to somehow embody something that she is not all that clear about. That sense of making things in order to know what it is you feel and think about something seems to me to be, give the work a vitality that I find Price's work lacking.
Right. There's definitely vitality here. I agree with you. Times there are things I question too of how she actually goes about, like you were referring to Degas, he was working much smaller scale and so on. But it's definitely, solutions that I also like, why is the ankle so thin? It doesn't quite balance with, or like, what's it sculpturally, what's going on, But I think it is saying something. It is like Paige was saying too, it is saying something. There is something. It's a commenting on something to do with the figure and sculpture and art today, and it's taking a lot of liberty for sure. And I had a little hard time with the abstract constructions. Maybe somebody else can say something about that. The stick leaning to the wall, and I kind of like that triangular thing or whatever actually. But just maybe somebody can put that in context a little bit.
No, they didn't. They didn't add anything to the exhibition from my mind. Quite liked that wooden construction, but I didn't
Exactly.
see its relevance to the rest of the work or the other things that were included in the show. Besides the figures.
Yeah, they seemed like they didn't quite fit in. Like this is the most interesting piece, this one here.
Yeah.
The stick on the wall, I didn't even like connect with that at all. I just like
That was my
passed it by.
favorite.
Like it didn't seem to add anything and it didn't seem to fit in any way that I could register.
Right, but I thought to myself, okay, chance, because like Garth, I kind of liked the construction itself, the way
Yeah, I
it's
did too. Yeah.
balancing thing, right? And then what I found really annoying actually was the painted sculpture stand, with the sort of and then the glass. It was like, okay, that's like very pretentious. So what's she trying to do? So then I was wondering, okay, maybe she's trying to make some like studio ambience or something. I don't know.
I mean, to go back to Brandt, though, I think, and maybe Jock, these figures are, they're not particular individuals. They're not they're not identifiable as a specific person, and they do reference other sculptures more than they might reference a particular living person. That for me was not an issue at all, and I can't see how it would be possible. But then neither did Price's figures represent a particular, specific individual. In that way, they have that in common.
For Price, it would have been an obstacle to the kind of communication he was after. With these pieces, I felt like the characters were similar in the sense that, like, the dancers in a Degas are almost interchangeable. Sometimes they're interchangeable. Sometimes, like the little dancer, they're like strikingly, harshly individual. And I thought that the thing about the sticks, it's like there were certain kind of jokes about the armature and construction, and the way I took it generally was that there was a kind of a little story, little commentary going on about ideal proportions versus the proportions that she actually uses, prefers, and that they're contra ideal, and the figures are kind of toying with the idea of measure and arithmetic proportion. And the yardstick on the wall is actually my favorite piece in the show.
Yeah, that makes sense, Brent. That makes sense. I mean, it was a commentary on, on measurement and proportion and ideal. And you're right about the Degas' Little Dancer. That is extraordinary in the way that comes across as a very specific person with very particular attitude and thoughts and disposition.
Well, is that supposed to be a standard for, I mean, bring it back to Donatello. I mean, is that supposed to be a standard for if the sculpture is good or not? Like whether it's personalized? I don't care if it's Sarah or Rebecca or whatever their name. I don't know. I just look at the.
No, absolutely.
I don't know. Am I being clear? I just don't understand quite why you're so hung up at that, because you said that several times.
No, I'm not hung up about it, and I think but I do think that it's very unusual. That's one of the things about the Degas Little Dancer is just how extraordinary it is.
I can see that.
You can have this presence which is universal, and at the same time very, very specific.
Right, which of course
these figures are not like that. I mean, it's the same. Basically, whoever it is, it's the same. It's the same person, if you can call it a person, each time. It's the same in each of these objects. It's the same persona that's being embodied.
Yeah, no, you explained it well with the universal and the personal. That was interesting. Thank you. Yep.
But I think Degas and Warren are both onto the way that society is willing to take a girl as a kind of an interchangeable part, and that they're all somewhat alike and equal and trivial and kind of marginal to where the action really is.
I just when bringing in Degas' Little Dancer, it is fine in many ways, but it bothers me in the sense, the same way that it bothers me to bring in Donatello's David, and the distinction between the Donatello and the Degas is that their sculptures are complete thoughts. And there's a jazz musician who Sidney Bechet, who said something like, anybody can play the clarinet, but very few people can complete a thought. It's fun listening to amateur clarinet players, good amateur clarinet players. Music is a wonderful thing that everybody can enjoy. Same way that this show was fun, but there's sort of a standard that Rebecca is starting to engage with, but it's worth making a distinction. And same with Price. He's starting to do something with sculpture, but there's a lot more to sculpture than we got in these two recent shows, is my point.
I'm sorry, Jock, but you need to tell us what it is that there's a lot more to that is missing from these two shows. I mean, you seem to want some kind of something that is, I don't know what, but maybe about some kind of resolution that you find missing in these two.
Yeah, exactly. And she, from the start has been all about kind of touching clay and marveling at how much fun it is to touch clay, and but she's sort of too precious about every dab of clay that she puts on a piece of sculpture. And she's precious about the pieces of wood. It's enough to lean a piece of wood or cast a piece of wood into bronze and lean it against the wall. That's it's interesting. It's kind of funny, but there are other places to go, and other people are going to other places, and going in a sort of careful way. The way Picasso developed Cubism is not a sort of scattered, whimsical, all over the place way that I see both Price and Warren proceeding in.
But Garth, I think that the Picasso that Warren is interested in is the Picasso of Boisjoli, and those really kind of crazy, distended, disjunctive plasters he made there.
Yeah.
She picks up on that, but strongly.
Yeah.
That's a real go-to for her. It's not analytical cubism.
She points to all kinds of people. She points to Rodin with multiple casts of the same thing. She points to Picasso. She points all over the place, but it's just pointing. It's not engaging. Picasso really engaged with different things at different stages throughout his career, but it was a wholehearted engagement and a complete intellectual engagement.
I disagree. I disagree, Jock. I'm sorry. I disagree. I think that she's not pointing to these things. She is someone who apparently has immersed herself in looking at a lot of other sculptors' works, particularly relatively recent, I would say, from Rodin on, more than the older stuff, but nevertheless that too. And then has gone into her studio, and with all of this stuff somehow in the back of her mind, she makes these things, so there are possible references to all kinds of things. In that sense, it's very rich. Not simply pointing to these things. I don't think she's trying to kind of weave a spell that conjures up previous sculptors' work. I think she's trying to weave a spell that engages us in the here and now with her and her activity in the studio. And I found myself very present there with her in the studio, feeling these things out in a much more, from my point of view, in a very enviably open-ended and handling material very freely, in a way that somehow or other I envy.
I didn't feel like her work, that she was precious in her handling of the material, didn't feel that way to me.
Not at all.
It did
Yeah,
feel more
I
like,
agree with you.
My favorite piece in the show was the figure that had no sticks attached to it, no extra decorations.
And no paint on it. That
Yeah, right, right.
the figure that Brandt referenced, Degas' little dancer. Yeah, that seemed to be the starting point. That seemed to be the original.
Yeah, but that seemed to me to be the finish. That seems to be the most complete. It's developed in the sense that decorations have been shed.
I don't think she thinks of it as decorations, but what do I know? I haven't asked her.
No, she doesn't think of them as decorations for sure.
But
She thinks of them as some kind of structural thing pointing to David Smith. And I say pointing to, not in a sort of pejorative way. She's looked at David Smith and she's engaging with him, trying to bring him in. It just doesn't work for me, but that's fine. The sense in which she sort of, well, she dropped the sticks, that pleased me.
Yeah, well, we don't know whether that was
You're
that. We don't
anti-stick.
know whether that figure was the conclusion of the series of work, or was.
Yeah, we don't know, but
Oh,
I'm sort of suggesting, that is my take on things.
uh-huh. And that was the one that you found most resolved from your.
Yeah, yeah. There's a sort of future there, or that it's a solid, complete sculpture.
How do we feel
how do you
about that
feel
foot
about it
turned
being on the
backwards?
base?
Well, that's the old Rebecca, or that she needs that. She can wheel it away, or it makes it makes it incomplete, and she needs to have some incompleteness, but it's unsatisfying to me.
Brian, you wanted to jump in.
How do we feel about that foot, that left foot being turned
I know.
180?
I
I
don't
mean,
Yeah,
know
that
the
about.
gives me a
puddles of
feeling.
feet. They're puddles. She doesn't make. She should be more precise.
But
Yeah,
Uh,
Jock,
I agree
Jock,
with
let's
you.
think about why she does it the way she does, because I think there's something coherent and deliberate and,
yeah,
not sort of casual about it.
there's a wonderful kind of tenderness to these puddles of feet. And they feel like they've descended from the top and puddled at the bottom. Degree of precision in the figure that I'm talking about with no sticks that I'm happier with.
I think less a matter of precision than clarity, right? It's simpler.
Yeah, yeah, but not too simple. It's not.
Mm.
There. She's let chaos or nature or whatever you want to call puddling interfere with anatomy.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you're coming from. I think.
That backward foot, though, that's a big interruption in anatomy. That's really, it's like taking because I think the little dancer also has the right angle, but it's turnout.
Yeah,
It's dance technique.
yeah,
But this piece is like something, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it doesn't, in the piece, it doesn't feel tragic, and it doesn't feel like a wound or an injury, but I guess you'd call it just like a kind of cross purpose or a frustration. Or what it reminds me of is the child Oedipus having his feet, disfigured. I
Yeah,
think that they
Yeah, that's
were
true.
um,
Like a lump, like
they were
a.
they were pinned through together so that he would not come back and would not escape the wild animals that presumably would take him away. And that figure, I mean, that's the one I guess I feel most emotionally jarred by. As I think about it now, I think to myself, yeah, in fact, I am quite affected by that one. I mean, there's something awful about that. And it's being done to a girl. She takes such pains to make it, a pretty girl, like a young dancer or I don't know what, a debutante, something carefree, someone carefree and could be careless. But then again, her feet as they are, that's impossible.
Well, that figure which we're focusing on is the most familiar, isn't it? That seems to be least surprising in the show.
Well, yeah, that it
Oh,
surprised me. The freshness and the vitality, the multiple figure compositions, if you like, are worth thinking about in this context. And to what extent are they confused and chaotic? And but to what extent do they have, is that her future? Is she going to work through this chaos, through the complexity of a multi-figure? That's interesting to me. The drama, Michael used the word drama when talking about Kennedy Yanko. I wasn't convinced by the sculpture that he was talking about, but as I'm not convinced by the multi-figure things in this show. But the drama business is interesting.
There are two works in the show that are composed of two figures. One is just two standing figures side by side. The other one is two figures interacting in some way. This one we're looking at now.
Yeah, and doesn't the reclining figure, aren't there sort of some extra parts in that? I may be misremembering things.
Yeah, but it doesn't amount
two fingers.
Doesn't amount to a second figure. Yeah, I mean, again, a reclining figure. Sure.
Yeah, and it's a weird base, and in many ways it just doesn't work. But maybe there's a future there.
You mean there's hope for the artist, or what do you mean?
A future for the artist, taking on that challenge.
Yeah, yeah,
They
right.
might have a future.
Well, I mean, I think we have very different, or at least some of us have very different kind of reactions to this, to experiencing this exhibition. My response was to feel an element of real joy and complexity and feeling. I was happy to be in there with these things. For Jock, and I'm not sure who else, it was not like that. It was something was missing, and I think something was missing for Brandt as well. Yeah, I think Paige and Torild kind of feel the same way I felt. Is that correct?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm just to not leave the subject of the feet so much. They become like a little bit like animals or trees or something organic, right? So, well, I like that as a metaphor. I like, yeah, I do. I think. I mean, it'd be really tedious if it was like 5 toes, and I like the way she's like, yeah, challenging it. Like maybe what you're saying, Jock, like, oh, she might take this further, be interesting, really interesting, right? I could see that. Yeah, I think that they're feisty works. I don't know, she's really brave with this, I think, and the scale of it, because it's addressing the whole history, like, Picasso, Donatello, whatever, Degas, everybody, right? I know Rodin was mentioned too. Because the surface is beautiful or cool or interesting and raw, and she's flirting with us a little bit. She needs to maybe, it's a little static. The more I'm looking at it now, it's a little bit static. Like we pointed out in the beginning, maybe it's the same figure that's just manipulated a little bit. So, but maybe that's part of the story, right? In a way, it's a story about women's history or something, like saints and pain and torture and all this stuff that we women go through a lot. Men too, but women, for a long time been underestimated or whatever. So maybe she's addressing some of that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think she's addressing a lot of it. I'm not unhappy. We're all very lucky to be able to see shows like this. One other thing that we haven't mentioned, that just 2 blocks away from this show is the big de Kooning thing. And there was de Kooning's Clam Digger in that show. And, lots of connections between the Clam Digger and Rebecca's pieces.
For sure.
Yeah, that was very good to see.
Yeah, Carol, I like that suggestion that the handling of the feet makes the figures rooted in some way. So they're not mobile in a sense. They're kind of fixed, like rooted down into the ground, and therefore that makes sense of some of the wheeled bases, because they need the wheels in order to be able to. But that's a little kind of funny, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. Rebecca Warren's work does move. It's changed considerably from time to time. As I started out saying, the last show of hers I saw in this gallery was very different, and to me, I found it much less engaging.
And so much more interested than price. Sorry, I just have to say that.
Yeah, good.
I wasn't part of that discussion, and I looked at it because I was sent the link. But yeah, so much more interesting, I think. But
oh yeah, I agree. Although I mean,
agree.
price is it's just a very different. It's a very different set of ambitions that are at work.
yeah, just they're a little hard for me to swallow because they're just so literal or something. But it's okay. We'll don't have to. We're not here to talk about that. I think she's taking on a lot more challenges of the history of the figure and all that, you know. And I do like the upside down, the two upside, the one upside down and the standing, the two figures, and yeah, you know, they're almost a little bit fairy tale-y sometimes, you know, with a black foot. I don't know. They almost look like little Nordic trolls or something out of a dream or something. I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of her work has that kind of surreal.
Right, that is true. That is true. Her previous work too.
Okay.
That relates back to the feet too, with the puddles, and in
Yep.
some way they're rooted, but in other ways, like this one, it feels very vulnerable also.
Right,
It could fall over. She had it without the support.
Yeah.
right. And that's an interesting as a metaphor too, right? Yeah. For the woman.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. I think we've done it. Thank you, everybody.